Hi, this is Hank Harrison, Virtual Maestro, here again with you today. We're going to talk about some piano sounds. And what I want to stress that may be a little bit different than what you've heard before is that acoustic piano sounds reproduced digitally will vary greatly, not only by manufacturer and despite all the sales pitch about who's got the best samples and whatnot, a lot of it is through how you acoustically electronically recreate an acoustic sound, and a lot of that has to do with EQing and whatnot. So, yes, a lot of the quality of the sound is built into the instrument, but a lot of the sound to us ultimately comes through how it's mixed and how it's EQ'd. So that's really important. But I want to look at some of the different grand piano and upright piano sounds on this particular instrument, which is a Dexibel a Vivo S9. It's an excellent digital piano and workstation. It has a lot more than piano in it, but I use it primarily for piano. But let's talk about the different acoustic piano sounds. Now, on today's electronic instruments, especially better ones like this instrument, these are different samples. The piano power-up sample on this instrument is called the Vivo Grand, which is their signature piano sound. It's sort of a middle of the road, not real bright, not real dark. It's sort of right in the center. But you'll find that pianos that are bright versus darker, or rounder, as some people say, sound better on different types of music. Typically, playing classical music is more commonly played on a darker, more robust instrument that has a not too brilliant of a sound, particularly in the alto and soprano registers of the piano. This is right in the middle, as most are. Again, if you're playing this sound on whatever instrument your piano power-up setting is, the first thing you want to look at before you judge that sound is the EQ. Look at how you're running it. If you're running it through a sound system, see if what it might need is just more treble or more bass or more mids, or just play around with the output of the mixer before you judge the piano sound. And again, different piano sounds for different types of music. I'm going to move to a pop grand piano. Now remember, every manufacturer has their own names for different pianos. Some will say pop grand, some will say rock grand, some will say pop rock grand. That's all just semantics, and what they're really doing is just giving you different pianos, different sizes of pianos, different pianos in different acoustic environments, that sort of thing. So here we move. The most noticeable thing here is that it's a much more bright sound, not necessarily bright, but just well enunciated and very crisp. I would think of this more of a piano that you'd want to play in an environment where the piano's got to pound through the rest of the musicians, like in a rock situation or pop music, that sort of thing. It kind of fits that because it's a bright sound. So if I were going to play Fur Elise, I probably would not pick that sound, but that's just my taste. Here we've got one that Dexibel calls the Japan Bright. Not nearly as bright as the piano we had before, but darker, but brighter than the original sound. Move on to another. Here's classic grand piano. That's a very dark sound, very appropriate for sonatas and things like that. We can go through the whole list here on this instrument, but there are other variations you'll find on some instruments that, for example, things like honky-tonk piano, which is purposely detuned a little bit because the honky-tonk sound is more of an old, reminiscent of an old upright piano with maybe a few strings missing and not perfectly in tune and very, very bright and that sort of thing. But it fits stride piano and early jazz piano and ragtime, things like that. So remember to look for the type of piano sound that you want. If you hear a piano that it sounds really great, but there's a certain area of the piano where you're playing where it doesn't sound exactly like you want it, much of that can be solved by just EQing the piano. You can either do, if you're running through a sound system, you would go to your soundboard and make EQ adjustments to bring the bright end louder or fuller, or vice versa with the low end, or sometimes there are too many mid-range sounds getting through and we need to dampen the mid-range a little bit because it gets a little full and fat in here, and it really makes the other ends of the piano sound a little weaker. If you don't have it run through a sound system, even on the most inexpensive keyboards, many of them, most of them probably have inside the piano an EQ. You'd have to look it up in your manual and make adjustments that way. You can make the piano brighter or more mellow. If you like that piano sound in general, you can keep that sound, but if you're finding it real boomy in the bass, for example, which happens a lot, you can reduce the amount of bass that's getting through so that that part of the piano is as comfortable and as beautiful as the rest of the piano that you're playing. If you find when you get to the top it sounds weak, you can go into your piano in most cases and bring that brighter side out a little bit. So it will depend from sample to sample. And remember that each one of these pianos, at least on this instrument, each one of these pianos is not just another lab tweak to a piano. It's a different source. When they recorded this sample, it was done on a different instruments and not just on one note, but they sampled throughout the piano to give you a realistic sound. So just tweaking one won't make it sound like the other, but that's a great feature using the EQ to get the great sound that you want for your particular song in the range of the piano that you're going to be playing the most, or if there's an area that you consider a little weak or a little too strong. What I hear a lot is boomy bass in pianos. It's like I get down here and this is so loud and so full that it makes the middle part of the piano just it's overcome with too much bass, and that's very common, especially if I'm running through a sound system. Because sound systems, we typically turn up the bass end of the sound system so it carries, so we can hear it. And if you're playing in an ensemble, you know, the drummer likes it loud so they can absolutely stay in tempo with the rest of the band. So it's really critical. However, it can really take away from the clarity of the notes in the middle. So you want to really watch that bass end. And it's important that when we crank the volume on the piano that we don't get a high end that hurts your ears. On some sounds, especially piano sounds, you can get that brittle, almost painful high end, especially if you're playing at a great velocity. You can get that, and it doesn't sound too comfortable. So use your EQ, pick a different sound, and please don't develop a favorite piano sound. Most instruments today have several different piano sounds. Find the one that's appropriate for that song. Don't get stuck in a rut with, you know, I always use this piano sound, because there's obviously, on any instrument, there's a lot of choices. And I encourage you to explore your instrument as much as you possibly can. Again, I'm Hank Harrison. Be sure to like this video. And if you haven't subscribed, do so, because we cover subjects like this all the time, and we'd love to have you on board. Thanks a lot. I'm Hank Harrison with Virtual Maestro.